Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. Well, I'm excited today to be joined by Julie Barton. Julie is a New York Times bestselling author, teacher, and writing mentor whose memoir, Dog Medicine: How My Dog Saved Me from Myself, chronicles her journey through depression and healing, guided by the unconditional love of her golden retriever, Bunker. With degrees in English, women's studies, and an MFA in writing, Julie blends an emotional depth with lyrical storytelling. Her work is a testament to the transformative power of vulnerability, nature, and human-animal bonds. She lives in Northern California with her family, with a group of pets, and shares her daily poetry practice on Substack. Julie, great to connect with you again. We met at the Jackson Writers Conference and got to share some time together. Thanks for joining Day in a Canoe.
Thank you for having me. It's a nice day out. Let's get in the boat.
Let's go. So I've got a question about the connection that people have to animals. And sometimes I feel that, there's such depth of connectivity with an animal that it makes the connection with human a little secondary in terms of quality, let's say. What's your point of view on all this? And maybe you can weave your story about your book and how that evolved into it as well.
Well, I think there is definite truth to that sometimes our connections with animals are transcendent. And the lack of language and the depth of connection, I think, opens up almost like, a part of our brain we haven't used since we got here on Earth. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's partly why it can be so powerful. For me personally, and this is part of where the book started was, I grew up in a loving but problematic household, and I didn't really feel safe physically and emotionally. And the the one sort of being with a heartbeat in my house that I knew wouldn't disappoint me or hurt me or leave or um, you know, say mean things was the dog. And that was really, really important for me as a little kid. I don't think I quite understood that was what was happening, but I really turned to animals, not just dogs as a kid. I mean, my room was like a little zoo. And I think I also felt some kind of like that I could save them, some kind of hero complex I think I had. Just like I didn't feel like I was being looked out for. So I thought, well, they must really need somebody. So I was, trying to save all the animals. Um, but I think there is something really to be honored about having a deep connection with an animal because it's unconditional. It's like I said, there's no language, so there's not, you have to learn to understand each other through physical cues, through, studying each other. Um, and that was, with Bunker for sure. I spent the first 3, 4 months of his life just being with him, and we knew each other inside and out. He knew me and I knew him. I knew what one ear back meant. And it wasn't even that it was like that meant X, Y, and Z. It was like in whatever context I read him and I understood him and he understood me. And it was something that at first I thought, am I making this up? Is this really real that he's noticing how I'm feeling and that he's coming and really being like almost like a therapy dog before there was such a thing, because this was in the mid 90s. Um, and I decided, I think this is really true. I think he's really seeing me and knows when I need somebody, and he would fight to get to me if he needed to in those times, and having that, helped me go back out in the world. I'd sort of had a well, not sort of, I'd had a big breakdown, and I was back home after college, a year after college, just really aimless, not knowing what I was gonna do and feeling terrified of the world, and getting him having a couple months at home with him where I really bonded with him, and then he also forced me to get out. That's the beauty of dogs. They make you go outside, they make you move your body, they make you, talk to people. Because when they're so cute, people come up to you, and that actually really helped that people would come up and say, "Oh, he's so cute. What's his name? How old is he?" And things like that. For me, that was almost like more a medicine in itself, that in that I knew that not everybody was gonna judge me, or, they just were looking at the dog and were excited about him. So, that's sort of my long answer to that. I think it's one of the few ways that we can connect to the natural world in our own home by these animals that are here.
You've been open about your journey around depression and the healing process. What do you wish more people would understand about that journey and
Mhm.
what's available to them?
I think one of the biggest things that is important is just to not have shame around it and to be able to say it. Like, I am not okay. And to know that that's okay. It's that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to say, "I'm really struggling," or it's okay to say, "My anxiety is through the roof." It's okay to say, "I can't handle this." And that, I think a lot of times, we can get so deep in our own heads that we isolate ourselves, and I think when you're able to say to somebody you trust, "I'm not okay," that's such a that alone is a burden lifted, just to say it out loud. And that there's so many resources now. There's so much that people can do, um, from therapy to different kinds of therapies like EMDR, and even, the microdosing that people are doing, to just having someone to talk to about it, I think is so important. I think there is this sort of loneliness epidemic in our world. I think it's especially with younger people, with men. I think it's really important that there's human to human interaction, and that you're honest and just don't try to say you're okay when you're not. If anything I learned with writing this book, the vulnerability that was terrifying to show was the main thing that people responded to, was me saying how bad it got, and me saying that, there were times I didn't want to be here, and that, I did get out of it, and that it's possible. It's not gonna last forever. It feels like it's gonna last forever. Feels like you're never gonna feel okay, but I have. And it doesn't mean that, I, you know, took a pill and got a dog and everything was better. That's not at all. It's been a lifelong journey. And just learning to sort of manage it. And I always say that I treat my mental health sort of like if I had diabetes, I would take my medication and I would monitor my sugar and I would make sure that I was okay. And I do that sort of with my mental health too. If I'm not feeling okay, I go back to therapy. I talk to my partner. I write. Do all the things I know that are helpful, get outside, and, if necessary, change medication. I've been on medication for years and years and years. So, um, I think the thing with parents, with kids, with, friends is just be able to talk about it, and then also be someone who, if someone says, "I'm really feeling depressed," you can say, "Tell me more. I wanna know. Share your burden with me," you know? And not go, "Oh, no," like, it's I think it's something that's it's just part of life a lot of times.
I agree. I think there's more that we have in common around this issue
Yep.
as humans and in community than not.
Yeah.
So, and we have a lot of focus on our culture to be outward appearance
Mhm.
focused
Mhm.
and create social cues and have certain status references, but what if we had that scorecard on the inside? How
Right,
would we look?
right.
And I think that's the invitation for all of us, which is to simply look in the mirror, the inside mirror, and
Mhm.
see what is there and explore doing the work. Now, you also teach students about writing. What are you focused on in that space, and where do you see your students kind of the most curious?
I focus mostly on honestly teaching vulnerability and teaching how to say the thing you're scared to say. Um, and I teach that by modeling it. I run a writing class twice a week that is a generative class where we work with a poem as a prompt. And I write with the students. So I'm also writing I we write with a pen, no computers involved, pen and paper because there's something really um, primal, visceral, and more natural about writing by hand. Um, you can't delete, and you also are forced to slow down, which I think is essential when you're writing, sort of like almost journal style, but most of my poems come from this kind of work. The thing that I think I try to teach most with them is that vulnerability. And then I think if I'm mentoring somebody and I'm helping them with a manuscript, um, that's when all the craft stuff comes in, the stuff I learned about in my MFA and, about staying in scene and pacing and dialogue and all those things are all things that are essential. With that work, the biggest thing is to stay in scene. Most of the time people just want to tell you what happened, but I think staying in scene is really essential. But yeah, I think with the writing classes, it's really just about being able to say what's really, really true, what's really, really there.
And as you look at your body of work and the dog medicine book, what has surprised you about how people have responded to it?
Well, I'm surprised that it reached as many people as it did. I remember writing it and thinking, this may never go anywhere. I might just have one reader who is someone who I like. That was my goal. I had one young woman in mind who needed this book. Um, and the fact that it's been translated now into, I think, 11 languages. Um, it's I get messages from all over the world. I think there's a few things that are surprising. Just the fact that it reached that many people, that I still get messages from people about it. Because at the time I was writing it, I was like, "People are gonna think I'm crazy. People are gonna think this is so weird." And I don't know, why am I saying this? Why the day it was published, I got in bed and I pulled the covers over my head and I was like, "What did I do? This is the worst idea I've ever had to tell everybody everything." Um and what happened because of that was that people were really grateful and saw themselves in it. I talk about sibling abuse, which was, sort of one of the bigger traumas of my childhood. I had an older brother who was very physically and verbally abusive, and I didn't know that that wasn't normal um, until I got out in the world and then really started just suffering because it was a constant threat in my life. And I think writing about that, sort of talking about that as something that isn't normal, was helpful to a lot of people. And I think just it's exciting to me that people still are engaged with books. Um, our culture is shifting so quickly away from long form stuff, and it's really just nice to. I just heard from somebody yesterday who just finished the book, and it always just means the world to me to hear from people.
When we met at the Jackson Writers Conference, I was sharing some perspective about true wealth, and it's what's available in life beyond just what's in a bank account statement or brokerage account, and
Mhm,
to explore various currencies that can be available to all of us.
mhm.
What does true wealth mean to you at this life stage?
Oh, I mean, it sounds cliche, but I think it's just honestly that, like, my kids are healthy and feeling okay and feeling capable. True wealth for me at this stage is having the flexibility and capacity to spend my time writing. Nobody talks about the fact that even a New York Times bestseller, like, I would never be able to live on what I made from my book or my touring or my, you know, conferences that I go to. I would be living in a tent. It's not enough to live on. And I think, I've talked about that a little bit in some circles, but it's really you almost have to have a sponsor. The people who are really truly making a living at it, I think is there it's a challenge and it's a difficult living to make. My wealth/financial story is that I worked in high tech for a long time. And, I worked at Microsoft for in the '90s, and then I worked at a startup, and I did not enjoy it, and my husband was the one who was like, "Well, what do you really wanna do?" And I said, "I wanna write," and he said, "Okay, we'll do it." I was like, "Well, how are we gonna pay the mortgage?" You know? And so true wealth really at that point was having a supportive partner who was like, "We're gonna figure it out. We'll figure it out." And then, our money story is really unusual, I think, in that he had a family his grandfather started a real estate company in Denver in the '70s, '60s, '70s, '80s. And, when we'd been married for probably 15 years or so, and they sold it, and we inherited millions of dollars. What's been really interesting about that is now I have this wealth, right? And my husband is one of those people who's like, it's not, don't let it change us. Like, we live in a modest house. We drive modest cars. We don't live as if we have what we have. And it's been really interesting because I don't think I would have necessarily done that had I not been married to who I'm married to. I don't know what I would have done. I think I might have frozen. It's a very strange thing to kind of like have money come in that just suddenly appears. But I value different things because the thing that we're always told we should have wealth, right? Or that this will make your life better. We have it, and life's the same. We don't have worries. We don't have worries about where we're going to, you know, pay for this or pay for that, but we do not live extravagantly, and I think it's really been interesting. And I think about it a lot, just wrapping my head around it, and it has given me the freedom to write and publish a poem every day and spend my time doing that, um, when if I didn't have that, I would be doing something else entirely and having to bring in money to pay for college and to pay for, so, um, it's been really, interesting, and we didn't tell our kids about it. They didn't have any idea about it. I think our youngest might have an idea. We did tell our older daughter when she was in college that, you have a little bit of money that's gonna be sitting for you, and you can access it now, but, you'll get more when you're 25, and she said, "I don't wanna see the account. I don't wanna know. Not until I'm out of college." So it's there's a you had in your survey this sort of like, one of the profiles you could tell people about the quiz that is so interesting about your money what do you call it?
We have a money personality
Money
quiz,
personality, yeah. It
14
nailed it.
questions. Do
Yeah.
you
What is
remember
it?
your personality?
Yeah, it was right on it was basically like conservative slash I don't remember what it was, but it nailed it. It was very much that it was like you're not focused on money, but also you're not spending, you know? And it's the funny thing, like, sometimes like, "Well, are we waste or should we do something with this?" But that's what happened when we got it was that it's just sort of a sigh of relief, but we're not gonna change our lives.
And that's good. It's interesting because, you bring up so many excellent points and angles of perspective. Number 1, the greatest wealth transfer in history is happening as boomers age and generational wealth is passed on, and it's expected over the next 20 to 25 years that $60 trillion worth of assets will pass from one generation to another. So your
Mhm.
story is going to become more common, and
Yes.
people receive these inheritance dollars and may or may not know what to do with them. And many times our belief about money will get challenged in those environments.
Right.
Just asking, what do I believe and how
Yeah.
do I handle this resource? And more money may bring more conveniences for sure. It may be easier to get services or nice things, but it doesn't necessarily create happiness and fulfillment the more that you get. And
Yeah.
so knowing what your wiring is really important so that you can make choice and not feel like you're overwhelmed or in this dark space of just I don't want to deal with it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
good to have openness, but yet have awareness that you have choice, that you don't have to chase a certain lifestyle level. And
Mhm.
I see this often when people receive money through inheritance, or even in the medical community when people who are residents finish their residency and now they're getting an MD and they're getting this significant raise, and there seems to be this need to, do I catch up? Do I now need to match my peers in how I demonstrate my status? And I think that's the trap. I think that's the whole slippery slope
True.
away from true wealth at times.
It's so
But it's
true.
to be aware and have that agency to act to what's meaningful to you.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it's partly because, for us, my husband is a professor, and he pursued that career path knowing that he would have this money because he went to, an Ivy League school, and all his friends are not all of them, but most of them are either bankers or lawyers, and he became a scientist and is a professor, but he says that, part of the reason he did it is because he knew that he would have this eventually. And that he wanted to pursue something he really wanted to do. And it was a luxury to be able to not look at the salary and say, this is what I'm really passionate about. He's passionate about, biology and the immune system and studying and doing research. And so for him, true wealth will come with the success of that. Do you know what I mean? Like with discoveries and things you can't pay for, things you can't get with money. Same with me. My success was writing a book, which is really freaking hard, and trying to make something of that. And you can't pay your way into that, you know?
Julie, I want to celebrate what you've done and the openness that you've shared along the way. I think your life is inspiring, and I'm glad our paths crossed and want to wish
Likewise.
you all
Me
the
too.
best for
Thank
what's
you so
next.
much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So fun chatting.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.